I think the big question in the League One player scramble is whether there's one slot available in League One or whether there's two, because I think the top four are a lock for a top six. Of course, Birmingham running away with the league at the moment. Wrexham and Wickham look like the main contenders for second spot, along with possibly Stockport, who I imagine are going to be pretty comfortable in finishing the top six as well. But I do think that there's going to be space possibly for at least one spot in that top six. I think it really interested to see what happens with Charlton, of course, very much the form side since November, with two late goals in that crucial 2-1 victory at playoff rivals Leyton Orient, and then another important win over Barnsley in midweek. They've certainly added a bit more creativity to the solid defensive base that we've seen from the Addicts under Nathan Jones this season. Huddersfield are an interesting one because they've certainly got some high-end quality in that squad, but it's also a little bit imbalanced. It's a bit excessive in terms of numbers, and Michael Duff hasn't quite been able to get the ideal template that he's looking for, and that he's achieved at this level before with Barnsley and even with Cheltenham Town in terms of squad balance. I think in terms of quality, it's up there, miles better than Cheltenham, and at a similar level, probably slightly better than Barnsley's. But in terms of balance of the squad, I think they're a bit short in certain areas, and I'm not sure they're quite ready to try and challenge for promotion certainly not ready for championship football at the moment, but they're certainly in the mix with the quality of manager that they've got, but they've not quite been at the level that maybe people would have thought this season, and they've dropped off a little bit in terms of results over the last month or so. Then there's Bolton Wanderers, 4 wins in 4 for them under Stephen Schumacher. Interestingly, I think performance-wise, they've got another gear to find, I think it's fair to say, and they've fallen behind in each of Shuey's first 4 games in charge. But what's really worked in their favour is A, they've got plan B, so they can revert to a different strategy if that's not working, and B, they're playing with a bit more directness at times, a bit more gusto that we weren't seeing from them before, so that could put them into the mix. Then there's a talented Reading side that are hoping more to fix their off-field problems more than focusing on the on-field problems. Hopefully a takeover for them is imminent. Leyton Orient, who had been the form side but have lost their last 4, and then of course Barnsley have won 3 of their last 4. So what's going to happen? Who's going to get into the top 6 of League One? Plenty to discuss then on this League One podcast. Yes, welcome along to EFL Debate. If you've enjoyed these podcasts in the past, you could do us a massive favour if you wouldn't mind and get subscribed to us on YouTube and or follow us on Spotify, because that would help us out an awful lot. So I'd be really grateful if you could do that. I'm also really grateful for my co-host Ed Walker, who's joining us this evening. Ed, thanks so much for taking the time out.
I was wondering if you need me, Gab, because your intro there felt like you were going through everything anyway. Kind of feel like we're already done. Do I need to be here? Shall I just go? You kind of already summarised everything anyway.
Absolutely. Ed, just wanted to get your take on the League One player scramble. Where do you see things at?
Well, here's where I admit something, Gab. I don't really care about the League One playoff scramble this season for obvious reasons, but I'm more focused on a different end of the table, let's say. I've had to kind of brush up a little bit more, keep a little close eye on it in the last couple of days. I echo your thoughts really in the intro, really. I think we are looking at Thor. I'm not 100% on Stockport yet, but I like that idea that they have got the quality to certainly at least cement themselves within those playoff places. And yeah, I'm finding myself going a bit on and off with teams at the minute. I'm very on with Charlton for obvious reasons because of their form. I was really on with Orient, and I'd be keen to find out if we can find a reason why it's kind of tailed off a little bit recently. If that's a personnel thing or a little bit of a find out with the tactics, I'm sure there'll be some explanations to that. And then the others in the mix, I think I'd agree with probably Barnsley and up. I find Barnsley a bit too hit and miss at the minute to really consider them a proper contender.
I think they're quite streaky, aren't they?
They're streaky, yeah. That's the thing you notice with them. They had this good spell and then a weaker spell. I think it's going to hold them back. That lack of consistency that's there. Regards to Reading, I think it's just great that they're just up towards the upper end. There's so much focus elsewhere with Reading for them. I'd call this an A-grade season if they ended up where they are now, just because of how it was. And I was not sure where to go with Reading at the start of the year, whether we'd find something similar to last year, where they're just trying to keep themselves above the dotted line. actually just been away to the other end. And any club that has to lose their star forward to a sale because they can do nothing about it, and they've finally been able to get a signing in, albeit Tom Carroll, I think, is more a body than any kind of actual genuine quality, because Tom Carroll's just exactly. Cheers to that, Jonathan. Cheers to that, Jonathan. All the same. Yeah, I think Tom Carroll's kind of more a body than necessarily an impactful sign, just because of where he's been previously the last couple of clubs. But nice to have Reading up there in the mix all the same. And yeah, I'm probably hottest on Charlton at the minute for quite obvious reasons. And I'm keen to see why Orient have kind of tailed off a little bit recently.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to say it's just one spot up for grabs in.
I'd agree with that.
Because I think there's still a quarter of a season to play and form can dictate a lot. However, I think Charlton are making a very good fist of...
And I'd also say I'm quite hot on Bolton at the minute. I'm really liking the way they look under Schumacher recently.
Well, should we go home then, Ed? Just say Charlton and Bolton are getting in top 6.
We've got to do the others justice, haven't we? We've got to give the others dimension.
The Europa League kicks off in 9 minutes, Ed. You can go now if you want.
I'll keep tabs on it. It's all right.
Well, let's be joined by our first guest of the evening, Adam Parks from the excellent Lowdown podcast on Leyton Orient. Thanks so much for taking the time out as well, Adam. Really appreciate you joining us. 4 straight defeats for Leyton Orient. Is that something you has taken you back a little bit after the brilliant form from around October time?
I'd say, yeah, four straight defeats is a tough one to take. We kind of before the Wrexham game, we had that run of Wrexham, Bolton and Birmingham. And to be fair, if someone had said we'd get 3 points from those 3 games, bite your hands off. I've said quite openly that if we got to the last 10 games on 57 to 60 points, which I thought was really doable, and to be fair, we should have beaten Charlton, even though we didn't play very well. And we should have beaten Rotherham, and we didn't play very well. So, there's fine margins in terms of form and players' form and the team's form. Kelman had a few sitters on Tuesday that he normally put away. So, it is what it is. It's peaks and troughs in a season, isn't it? And frankly, we've had a very, very high peak that not many teams have matched, apart from Birmingham and maybe Charlton in the last 10 games. But again, there's 11 games to go. You just said it, didn't you? You just said there's 25% of the season more or less to go. So we can't really rule ourselves out of it. And everyone's got to play each other. We've only got to play Wickham and Huddersfield now, and Barnsley. So 3 of our last 4 games might be very defining of our season. I think we have to win on Saturday. There can't be any excuses. We've probably got to put a run together now of 7 points in 9. So not losing at Blackpool, Mansfield and getting a draw, but beating one of them is definitely something I think we've got to do. So I think if you want me to put my eggs in baskets, we need 10 points from the next 4 to 5 games to even stay in it.
Do you agree with that, Ed?
Yeah, I think it's just getting back to the stance we've seen before. It's the same with the playoff races. I'd say in all 3 leagues, you're looking for the ones with the highest level of winning consistency, just taking that form in the right moment that can take you in there right to the end, I guess, really. Because I've seen previously a sign of Orient that they just looked phenomenal. And that standard, I was wondering how long that standard would stay. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, Parksy, do you think there's something you can attribute to this little recent drop-off? Is it the fixtures? Is something little switch with the team? Have you noticed a certain attacking aspect has maybe not hit to the same level recently? Is there something definitive?
Every team's got injuries, Ed. But we keep having injuries at the wrong points. Like we started the season without Jordan Graham and Theo Archibald. Then we lost Dan Happy. Then we got Dan Happy back. Then we lost Dan Happy again. We've lost Omar Beckles, who, if anyone's listened to me for the last few years, I'm not his biggest fan, but this season been player of the year. And when the EFL were, the international breaks and stuff are great for the first time or second time you get them, but then you've played 9 Saturdays in a season by the end of the season, which is ridiculous. You're having loads of Tuesday Saturday games. It may seem a little contradictory, but I was exceptionally annoyed by the EFL and whoever dictated that we should play Wrexham within 8 days, and mandating that when there was 6 Tuesdays at the end of the season that had no fixtures in them. So it doesn't help. If you look at our run, when we were winning or getting good results, obviously that form continues, doesn't it? And that's a trend. The game against Bolton, we were winning and we were playing well. And a couple of really lazy challenges and mistakes just kind of crept in. Birmingham, we know what happened there. Still not quite sure how that wasn't rescinded for whatever technicality in the first 10 minutes of a game against a team that we would have given a game to. Not saying we would have beaten Birmingham, but the first 10 minutes, if that would be an example of how we were going to perform for the rest of the game, then it would have been a very close game.
Can I just come in there? I completely agree with you, because I was there, and I was actually, selfishly as a Birmingham City fan, I was relieved when Jack Carey got sent off, because I think if it had been 11 against 11, I don't think we were. I think for us that performance wasn't as quite as good. We were still decent standard, and I think we managed the game well, especially in the second half. But I don't think, and certainly in the first half, I don't think we were at the level that we normally are. So I think that, if that had stayed 11 against 11, it wouldn't have surprised me if you'd taken the lead, and all of a sudden it could have been a different, more of an awkward evening for us.
Well, it's the same as the game against Bolton, wasn't it? I mean, you've got one of those results in them. It could have been the Orient that day. And then with the Rotherham game, well, the Charlton game, sorry, I've skipped one, which I've probably wanted to banish from my memory anyway. We've really struggled against big teams, like tall teams, big physical teams. We saw that against Rotherham on Tuesday as well. But you get your points, you get your wins when you don't play too well, and that's a sign of a good team. And we were in the 92nd minute winning the game. But it's ironic that Richie Wellens has got us all thinking we're no longer Little Leyton Orient, and then we've just proven that we're Little Leyton Orient again, because we do these things where we let in a goal in the 92nd and 97th minute. Again, like Charlton, every time they beat us, whether it's the first game of the season or it's deep in the season, Nathan Jones jumping in the crowd, be ashamed, mate. That's disgusting, because you ain't done anything yet. You get Charlton into the Championship, then you can have all the crowd surfs you want. But honestly, you ain't won nothing yet.
I quite like that.
No. Look, listen, we can talk about Steve Evans as much as we want. These kind of managers wind me up. I mean, they go up to the crowd and do that, but jump into them's a bit too much. You couldn't break us down, and then suddenly you got two corners and you won the game. Fair enough, be happy, but rubbish. Anyway, we'll move on.
A question, Paxi, and I want a really honest answer to this.
I'll always give you an honest answer, Gab.
Okay, if the roles were reversed and you'd scored 2 in injury time at the Valley,
Richie wouldn't do that, though. Richie,
no,
let's take it as a. That's true. Actually, I've seen Richie. He doesn't tend. Okay, but let's say Leyton Orient had a different manager. What would you would you and they had a really passionate.
Well, it brings up the question, Poxy, how easy is it to get into the crowd at Brisbane Road? Because I know the main stand's a bit far back, but I think the main stand bottom tier is kind of ground level, isn't it? You're not having to climb up any stairs.
So it's the east stand where the away fans are. You have to climb over an electric boundary to get to it. But no, you were talking about hypotheticals now, Gab, and I don't think we're dealing with hypotheticals. We're talking about Nathan Jones and Richie Wellens and two different ways that the managers react to things. I mean, I could understand.
Don't evade the question, Parksy. I'm asking you, like, if Leyton Orient had a super passionate manager in place and you went to the Valley, and
I think he's basically saying, Parksy, if you were a Charlton fan, you saw Jones do that, would you be all right with it?
Well, the only time I remember an Orient manager going into the crowd was Ross Embleton at Mansfield when we won 3-2 in the 93rd minute. And then he nearly got ejected by the stewards because they didn't realise he was the manager. So, yes, there are times, and yes, maybe I'm a little bit bitter, but if you go back to the second or third game of the season, they were doing the old Jurgen Klopp up to their cop end. Like, honestly, it gets ridiculous.
But what I'm saying to you, Paxi, is it's very.
I'm skirting the question, Gav. I've seen it. I've been part of it before.
Lad. Can we move on to the football, please? I don't really care about this.
No, I just want to make the point. I think your answers highlights the fact that you absolutely hate Nathan Jones if he's the opposition manager. But I do think that you love his passion.
I would ask does Parksy like any opposition manager? Is my question.
There are a few that I do actually like. Yes, okay. I do like a few opposition. Okay. But if you could go back through my whole times on the EFL debate, Steve Evans is definitely on the top of the hit list, and Nathan Jones I rated quite highly. And yes, it's emotive and etc. But I think. If they'd have qualified for the playoffs, I'd probably set with it. But they've had a pretty average season until the last 10 games. They were right down there. So it's all like you say about form. I get it. I get it. So let's move on to the next one. Rotherham on Tuesday. Again, another big team. Steve Evans, crap. Honestly, quite bad to watch, if you want me to be totally honest. And I've never enjoyed watching Steve Evans teams, even when it was as a neutral. And they got some really good players.
Well, I can't imagine you'd have enjoyed watching yourselves lose 3-0 at Stevenage.
Yeah, but we beat them 3-0 at Stevenage. It's not about Steve Evans so much. Like, you watched him when he was at Leeds or when he was at Gillingham or anywhere. It's the same kind of the format he fills. He gets really big players. He becomes a physical team, and the players that Rotherham had on there, like Wilkes and Clark Harris, are not fit. Like, they don't have to play that way. Clark Harris has played in other clubs and been really expansive and a really, really important player at how he plays, and he becomes negated in that system, and it's quite. I find it quite sad from a footballing sense. I think like someone like Clark Harris or Wilkes playing for Leyton Orient would be. I mean, I couldn't even imagine them playing for the Orient, to be fair, because I think they'd be an absolute addition to it,
wouldn't you?
Yeah,
I'm just wondering, Parksy. I wanted to talk to you about Jordan Brown. Are we talking about somebody who's getting back to last season's levels?
I think he was, but I think they're all suffering. I think the whole team. Jamie Donnelly against Charlton. I turned around to my friend Ian during the game, and I said he's knackered. The guy needs to come out of the team. After the game against Rotherham, Richie Wellens has said the same thing. I think that stands for a few players, because they're having to play week in, week out, or Tuesday, Saturday, because we've got the injuries to key players. Sweeney, Curry getting injured. Sweeney, I'm sorry, as a backup coming on for the last 10 minutes or the odd Johnson's Paint game, I get it. But I personally feel like that's where teams look at our strength in depth. And whilst we've got loads of players who can play out wide and in the middle, we haven't really got strength in depth at right back. We haven't got strength in depth at left back. And the fact that we've got Brandon Cooper and Reg playing at centre back now, and they've not really done anything wrong for the last 2 games. It's, I don't know. It's one of those things that if things happen for a reason, things happen at certain points in the season. I think if we were to finish 9th, we'd be disappointed now. I would have to go back to the beginning of the season when I thought we were going to struggle, and the 16th would be a good finish. So I think at some point in the summer, if we don't make it into the playoffs, I will probably say, yeah, that was a good season. What I don't want to see us do is go on another 2 or 3 games without winning, drop into the second half of the table, and then end in 15th or 16th, because that would be an absolute gut punch. And I do fear that we would probably be looking at Richie looking elsewhere if he doesn't feel like he can keep the squad together.
Interesting. What do you think, Ed? Do you think Leyton Orient are going to be able to keep hold of Richie Wellens beyond the end of this season?
Oh, I'm trying not to think about the summer. I'm trying to focus on the season that's going on now instead. Look, I'm a massive admirer of Richie Wellens. I've been for a while. I'm glad. I feel like we're finally getting a chance to be able to actually in League One to realise what he's properly about, because I feel like his pedigree so far has formed in League Two with his work at Swindon and indeed with Orient, and now I think we're really starting to see people are starting to realise just how articulate and how smart a guy, and I'm a really big fan of his football. Parks, I wanted to ask you about Charlie Kelman, because you kind of touched on a little earlier. I'm a little bit intrigued by him. I haven't quite worked out what kind of footballer he is yet, because my perception of you guys is you've got a front line that I would think of as quite fluid. I'm not looking at anyone that's like a thick centre forward there. I'm thinking in my mind, you've got a trio, and I'd probably include Donnelly just behind, who can kind of interchange with each other and be quite fluid, which I kind of think fits in with Wellens' play. I'm wondering where you kind of sit with Kelman, who seems to be the main guy leading the line in the lineup at the moment.
I think there was a great block on Tuesday that I think if we'd have scored, then I think we would have won the game. So, I'm not really calling out Kelman for massive misses, but he is at times wasteful. He had a purple patch during our run where he seemed to come up at the right times with the goals. He's a presser. He likes to put the defenders under pressure, especially the fullbacks if they're going out wide and he's there. But yeah, I do agree there is an element of fluidity about our forward three, but it was a lot better when we had O'Neill in there, because we started to see, again, you're going to get me frustrated about players. I know we're talking about Kelman, but we keep getting these players back and they start to really perform. O'Neill had been quiet at the beginning of the season and then suddenly he came good and he was playing really well and then he got injured. Dan Adji was playing really well and then he got injured. Dan Happy was playing really well and he gets injured. I mean, if Charlie Kelman was to get injured, it would probably change the way we play.
Yeah.
I think we could play. I mean, I know that as a game, I can't remember exactly what game it was, but there was a game where Azim Abdullah played in a false nine, a bit like it was straight after the Man City game, I think. And there was a few jokes going around that he'd stolen Pep's tactics, and we still won that game quite comfortably. So
Rich tactics, more like.
Well, maybe they were lucky, weren't they? And, you know, Plymouth proved that they're susceptible. So I'll be surprised if they're in the Champions League, but we're not talking about that entertainment league anyway. Yeah, I think Coleman has definitely come on. He's a lot bigger this year. He's a lot stronger. He's got a bit more savvy. You kind of forget how young he is. He's still quite young.
We've known about the years, though. I remember he scored on a halfway line against Southend, against Plymouth, wasn't it, to Southend?
Yeah.
That's my first memory of Kelman. It always comes to my mind. I forget how long he's actually been at this.
But isn't this is a totally different conversation? Maybe we'll just keep it brief, which is going to be good for me because we know that I don't keep things brief. But these kids that are playing in the academies and not getting chances in their first team, and they're taking so long to develop because they're playing on. I mean, I get what loan systems are there for, and I get that playing for different managers can be beneficial for some players. But Kelman only seems to have played really well for Richie Wellens. So going to all the other places has probably been detrimental to him. So I feel like he's maybe 2 years behind where he potentially could be right now. And if he was 2 years ahead of where he is now, he wouldn't be playing for Leyton Orient in League One. I think QPR are probably interested to see how he finishes the season as well, because if he does get up to near 20 goals in the leagues, he's on 11 now. I think they have the option to extend his contract. If not, it's still in date and it's still got another year to run. QPR might want to give him a chance next year.
I feel like when you think about QPR, Gab, you think about people like Alfie Lloyd and Rayan Colley in that position already ahead behind Michael Frey. It doesn't feel like there's a spot for him really in that team at the minute.
Yeah, that's fair. So there could be an opening, especially if what Parksy's saying. That...
You reach a stage when you're having the guys get multiple loans from one club. You kind of look at it and think there's going to be a point where you just let go, aren't you?
Do you know what as well, Ed? I think sometimes players pitch themselves too high, whereby they want to be perceived as being at a certain level, but then they don't end up playing and they lose momentum. Whereas sometimes it's better to go somewhere where you're very confident you can gain some momentum and actually build the career that way. Parksy, just before I let you go and bring in Alan Smith from Red All Over, give me a number between 1 and 10 for your level of confidence about Orient's playoff prospects.
Oh, it feels like a trap.
It is a trap.
Yeah, I feel like Admiral Akbar in Star Wars 3. It's a trap. I'd say if you'd have asked me before Charlton, I would have given you a strong 8. Without knowing the lineup for Saturday, if we don't win Saturday, it'll be a low 3.
Oh, wow,
I'd say going into the game on Saturday, I'll keep it as a 6. I feel like the fixture list might be our friend. I think Wickham have got a lot of damage to do because they've got to play everyone more or less in that top bit. So, and a few teams have got to play each other. I think there could be the last 2 games, maybe the last 3 or 4 games, Barnsley, Wickham and Huddersfield, that may be decisive. If you were to say to me now, could we go to Huddersfield on the last day needing a result? I'd probably take it.
I think you could both go there needing a result.
Well, that's what I mean. Huddersfield, if you look at the form in the top,
direct shootout, you never know.
Look at the top 10. Huddersfield they've lost 3 of their last 5 games. We've lost 4 on a trot. It's not, we lost to Rotherham, okay, but the rest of the teams we've lost to have been teams that are on the hunt for promotion in the last 4. So yeah, I think that a lot of teams are taking points off of them top teams that are in the bottom half as well, so they're fighting for their life. It could go anyway. I mean, we were talking about points, and I'll be quick. I know you've got to get Alan on, but the thing for me is that how low can the points go to get into the playoffs? And, you know, you're looking, are Charlton and that going to only get 15, 16 more points and the next 11? Not the way they're going. So you're looking at other teams to drop out. So Huddersfield, your Wickhams to stumble or something, just to capitulate. So I'll go back to what you're saying about maybe there only being one spot. I think on current form there probably is. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's Charlton that will come out there. I don't think it'd be Bolton that will come out of there. I do think it might be Huddersfield. Okay. But that doesn't mean I think Leighton Orient will be there.
Even if Huddersfield come out, that would still need someone like Stockport to drop out. So that's the thing. So it's going to be difficult for Orient. So you're up against it, but you've certainly proven people wrong and put a run together before, and hopefully you can finish the season that way. Parksy, thanks for joining us, and keep up the great work on the Lowdown podcast.
Cheers, Ed. Cheers, Ed. See you later.
Top man. Delighted to be joined now by Alan Smith from Red All Over. Alan, first of all, thanks so much for joining us, especially off the back of a tough week for yourself, mate. So sending lots of love to you and your family. Just wondering for Barnsley, with 3 wins from your last 4 games, has that revived your sort of playoff hopes?
Not really. It looks, to be honest, Gab, it's a bridge too far, isn't it, honestly? But anything's possible. At the moment, we're struggling with injuries. Gauchi out, Pines out, Phillips out, got injured Tuesday night. Barry Cotter out, Josh Earl, Georgie Gents out for the season, John Lewis, and MDG suspended. So there's big gaps in our squad at the moment. We're depleted. And they've recalled 2 loanees from Peterborough Sports. Young Bailey McCann from under 21s, Donny Rovers, Gaffer's lad, grandson, and midfielder Jonathan Bland. So at the moment, it's tough for Darrell Clark, who's been really, really let down, I believe, by the board and the January window. But it is what it is, and we've got to fight on Saturday against Blackpool.
Certainly have. Do you feel like there's a disconnect between what Darrell Clark wants to do and how he works best and what the club are trying to do? Because for me, I'm not sure about the compatibility side of things, and I felt this probably since Darrell Clark was appointed. Definitely, Gab is working under, for me, extreme circumstances, and a lot of fans are wanting him sacked. But you can only play with the tools that you've been given. And for me, we've been in playoffs for the last 2 seasons, and we should be progressing going forward. But this season, as you can see, lads, we're going backwards, and we shouldn't be going backwards. We should be up there, and 6 points off Huddersfield. And you know, it's a big game Saturday. We need the 3 points. But April's a big month for Barnsley, isn't it? Because we've then got Birmingham. You've got Birmingham away. We've got, Bolton at home, and then we go to Orient. And then there's last away game of the season. It don't get any easier, does it? Reading away. You know, so it's going to be tough to pick up points to make that gap up. Certainly is. I'm wondering the big sort of positive for Barnsley fans to kind of grab onto at the moment is Davis Keeler done 13 goals for the season. I'm really enjoying the kind of both the composure that he brings into the final third, but also the way he carries the ball and the sort of the swagger that he brings. Has he been a joy to watch among what's been a bit of a disjointed season for the Reds?
He is. You know, we knew what he could do at Mansfield. It took a while for him to settle into our style of play. And where he comes is great, cutting in off left hand side, isn't he? And putting ball into the far corner. We know what he can do. But he was unlucky, I think. He went through about 4 players Tuesday night at Charlton, and he just didn't get that finish, did he, to equalise. But it's the mistakes. We've given too many goals away by defensive errors and cheap goals. The cheap goals we've given away, as you well seen. I mean, that one on Tuesday night, the free kick. O'Keefe shouldn't, to be honest, in my opinion, should never have took him. It was going no way, no need to give a free kick there. But the wall, I was saying in our show, in Premiership, you get somebody lying on behind ball on floor to stop it if it's going. If wall jumps, it can't get towards goal. We didn't do that. We jumped, and no disrespect to Smith, I think he should have got that. He should have stopped it, but it is what it is, and another 3 points dropped.
What do you make of Barnsley, Ed? We mentioned them earlier in the season, very, very streaky this year, and you're kind of wondering, other than people like Mark Roberts, who is one that you know what you're going to get from, it feels like there's lots of players who are a little bit enigmatic and inconsistent in that squad, which is a little bit different to where and how Darryl Clark has got his best results in the past.
Yeah, and I echo what Alan's been saying, really. I don't think we've seen the full level of personnel you want. You look at the quality. In my head, I think there's a really strong midfield when you've got Adam Phillips, Luke O'Connell, and John Russell as a trio. But we had to see a bit more of Kelechi and McCarley recently, perhaps more than we'd desire. As he mentions, no Donovan Pine, being out Mel Gigivigne, that recent injury to Josh Earl as well. I can't really say much more than what's already been said. It kind of feels like the most enjoyable part of Barnsley has been Keeler Dunn, and maybe I'd say Stephen Humphries alongside him. I don't know if you find that works complementary as a front pair or not, Alan.
I don't know. It's struggled, Humphries. I think he puts a lot of work in and puts a shift in, but when you don't get supply, it's tough, isn't it? He was subbed on Tuesday for Max Waters. Waters scored a goal on it other week when he come back after injury. I won't be surprised if Humphries is on bench against Blackpool and Waters starts. We're too weak. You know, we haven't got 15 season striker, and it's struggling. I mean, goals wins games and gets you where you want to be. And
is there
when you've only got Keeler done. Sorry?
Yeah, is there a real frustration with some of these January signs? Because you've had the lad Clement Rodriguez, who I think came in from Bastia, barely be seen. The two wing backs, I know Dexter Lembicasa came in as kind of a right wing back option. He's been here and there. I was a little bit hopeful about Neil Tharuja again. We've just not seen much from him at the left hand side.
He got injured. He got an injury, so he's come back, and I still think he's carrying an injury. As far as Lembasika or Limp Biscuit, as somebody's calling him, he's not pulling up any trees. He's not enhanced the squad, in my opinion, and especially Rodriguez is lost. Don't see much of him. So why get him on loan in January window if we're not, he's not up and ready to go. So it just shows that our recruitment team in this January window have failed us fans, and they've failed especially the manager. And we're going backwards and not forwards. There's still hope, but it's only hope that we're living on.
What's the danger? How big a decline could we have here? I know we're looking at Barnsley, and we'd agree that finishing outside the playoffs, given the recent seasons, would be seen as very bad, understandably. Is there a chance we fall into the bottom half here? How it's difficult to know because you seem incredibly streaky.
We might be near to Gab 17th. Who knows? We have been on free fall. We've got to get the winning. We've got to get back to winning ways. And we've got Blackpool and then Mansfield. Not easy games for us. None of the games are easy at this moment in time. We are depleted. We are. And if we get players coming back from injury, could they get another tweak? Could they get another injury? Do we bring them back too soon? So it's looking like the under-21s may be coming in to bolster our season, and it's not the best time to get these lads in who have not played league football.
Well, in another way, you could argue it is, because the gap to the playoffs it's going to look difficult, isn't it, to get to the playoffs? The 6 points. It's certainly looking like you might be in League One next season. Are there any youngsters there who could maybe make an impression? I know Vimal Yoganathan is one that's quite highly rated around those parts.
Yeah, Yoganathan, Jonathan Bland's decent. If we get him up to speed, there's Bruce Dyer's son, Josiah. There's a fair number, but there's not many youngsters get through to first team football, do there? In any, football league side, it's difficult to break through. Personally, it's I don't know. I just don't know. We should have got more experience in, and I think the experience to what we've got I mean, Robbo in the last 3 games has been immense. Mark Roberts, leader. And for me, Luke has not been at his best since he had this illness. And I think the captaincy's played a part on his mind. He's not the Luke O'Connell that we know.
Yeah. So where do Barnsley go from here then, Al? Sort of throwing it forward a little bit. Would you like to see the club, from what, which I'd kind of infer from what you've been saying, maybe move towards helping Darryl Clark, maybe give him a bit more autonomy, maybe back him a bit more to bring in some of those experienced players, as maybe compromising the model that sort of Mladen Sormas has implemented as sporting director?
They've got to. I think there's about 8 players who are out of contract at end of season. So that's a big chunk of this squad who aren't probably going to be renewed. So they've got to build. We've got to rebuild again. And if you're rebuilding, it costs money. And I don't think we've got, at the moment, our board are putting money in to keep us going. So it's a difficult situation where we are. I think the accounts are going to be announced in the next couple of weeks and put out there. So it's going to be interesting where we go. As I said, the fans are brilliant. Our fans support our football club wholeheartedly. Travelling away to Charlton Tuesday night and getting back home about 2 or 3 o'clock. Credit to them. Unfortunately, I didn't get on Tuesday, but it's a big ask. It's a big ask, and where we've been and where we're going to is not very good. And honestly, truthfully, I feel for Darryl Clark. He's took this role on, and he's not had the best support.
Well, hopefully you can do things to pick things up a little bit and give the fan base a bit more room for optimism. But a tough time at the moment without some of those key players. Alan, thanks so much for joining us, and keep up the great work on Red or Laver. Okay, cheers, lads. Best wishes, Alan. Cheers.
Thank you.
So, Ed, I think from what we've spoken there with Alan, I think it's hard to see Barnsley making up that gap into the playoffs. So therefore, if we rule them out, it's looking like 1 or 2 from a possible 5, if you include Reading, who are on a nice unbeaten run at the moment, a little bit under the radar, and Leyton Orient, who we've seen sort of pick up some form in the past.
Yeah. Simply put, that's the way to go with that. I don't think Parksy kind of summed it up there. We want to see Orient back to a kind of level of thought. I try not to be reactive with this, but it's tricky because you look at Charlton and Bolton right now and probably feel they're the ones with the most confidence, and you're a little bit concerned about the situation Huddersfield seem to be in. I think there was a bit of the perception that Huddersfield were kind of going to be the best of the rest, that we were going to have Birmingham running away with the title, and Huddersfield were going to kind of get themselves to the automatic conversation. Yeah. It actually feels like more they're trying to keep themselves in the playoff conversation. I'm a little bit concerned because I had this idea they were going to add this Dion Charles and Joe Taylor front line that was going to set this league alight. Joe Taylor's had an injury, so be it, that's fine. But I thought Dion Charles was going to carry a lot more influence than he has at the moment. So that's kind of alarming me that he seems to be preferring Callum Marshall and Josh Carone as his front 2 at the minute.
Yeah, well, we'll shelve the Huddersfield conversation because we have got a fan hopefully coming on a little bit later. Matt Shaw from And He Takes That Chance podcast has just been delayed. But I did want to touch on Bolton Wanderers because we weren't able to get a trotter on. Sounds funny to say that, doesn't it? We weren't able to get a trotter on tonight.
Where are they all?
I know, exactly. But they have taken 13 points from 5 games since Stephen Schumacher took charge. But each of those victories have come from behind. So it shows they've got a bit of bounce back ability about them.
Yeah, they're at the Pirelli at the weekend, and I wish they'd held on to Everett for a bit longer. I think they've gone a bit too early with the switch to Schumacher. No, I think it's kind of what we thought was coming. Everett, that felt a long time at kind of teetering point for ages, and you always kind of wonder when the end point is. And I think it came, was it about a month ago now? I'm trying to recall the exact point that we had that switch over. I think it was after a defeat to Charlton, on top of my head, if I recall correctly, is when that changed there, replacing with Schumacher, who I still hold in very high regard. I think he's got fantastic stock. His last season, League One, as we know, was exceptional. And I really think that the quality is there anyway. Just need a manager that could just get things ticking. And I've got to say that my favourite thing about Bolton at the minute is that front line. I think Joel Randall's starting to prove the worth that was worth bringing him in. And when you couple that with Aaron Collins, who we know his qualities of forward, and John McAtee, I think is a fantastic ruthless finisher, it's one hell of a front line they've got at the moment. And no wonder they're looking so confident.
Well, do you know what I like? I think with Aaron Collins and John McAtee, they're both very strong runners. And I'm not sure under Everett that they really maximised those strengths, because they were very quite stale in the end in their sort of possession play, and they were so patient. And in the end, they kind of got found out at the end of Everett's reign. Whereas what I like about Schumacher, he does have some stylistic ideals, and we did see his Plymouth Argyle team play some really good football. But at the same time, they were able to play what we've seen from Bolton as well. He's adaptable, he's flexible, he's got good in-game management. And what I liked about Bolton, in the 3-1 win over Birmingham, was they weren't afraid to play forward early sometimes and play with that bit of a hint of directness, a little bit of gusto.
I think Schumacher kind of summed up listening afterwards. The Blues, I think your fans have been kind of frustrated a bit by the lack of teams that have gone at you lot, particularly when it comes to St Andrews, just because you're so vastly superior in terms of their overall quality. I think a number of sides have come there and tried to play quite conservative, hold them at bay for as long as they can, not really take the game to them. And this occasion at the U-Ball, it felt like Schumacher's incentive was, let's go and take the game to them, let's see what can actually happen and try and play to them. And I think it's fair to say they did take advantage of the fact that Allsop wasn't in goal, because we all saw the Ariston Peacock throw, but you make use of that all the same. It's the kind of result that I think really demonstrates that just how good that front line is. And I agree with you, that more direct sense, not afraid to kind of hit it a bit further along, work it a bit back to front a little bit quicker, compared to the more maybe a bit patient, maybe a little bit possession-based focus that was there under Everett. They seem to have a bit more of a pragmatic approach to them now.
Yeah, absolutely. So really encouraging signs for Bolton Wanderers, which is worrying for Huddersfield. So we're joined now by Matt from the And He Takes That Chance podcast on Huddersfield Town. Matt, I've had a lot of faith in Huddersfield all season, just because, as I've probably spoken to you about this in the past, I've got an enormous amount of faith in Michael Duff. But it feels like a trade-off for me from Huddersfield, in terms of, yes, you've got this manager that I rate that highly, but you've also got a very imbalanced squad that looks a little bit short in certain areas. And so where's that trade-off landing you in terms of recent form?
That misplaced faith, Gab? So unfortunately for us, I think last time we spoke, I mentioned that we had a lot of injury problems, and injuries at that point were pretty much cutting the legs off our season. Yeah, I mean, at this moment in time, I think we've pretty much had our head cut off by injuries. We just absolutely decimated, Gab.
Is that one of the injuries?
The other day, and we've had more players injured than half. Honestly, we've had more players injured this season than half of the EFL have had to use in the matchday squad. It's insane. We've had 30 players injured, and it's one of those things where they're out for 2 weeks, in for 2 weeks, out for 2 weeks, in for 2 weeks. So there's never any momentum that you can build. So you can't really give Michael Duff any kind of real clear appraisal, if you like, because he's never had it. Not once this season has he had his full strength team to pick from because of injuries. Not once. He's only been able to name a unchanged team twice, and then one of them was against Wrexham on Tuesday, and of course we named an unchanged team, and we had 4 players go off injured during the course of that game. And it's just absolutely cut us off at the knees, head, arms, shoulders, everywhere. It's just absolutely killed us.
It's made you deaf and blind.
Oh, honestly, I can't see. I can't speak. Never mind seeing. Gab. It's been a shocking season for that, and it's depressing as well. Every time we have a press conference with Michael Duff, it feels like you're going into your GP surgery, ready to hear some bad test results or something. It's genuinely, honestly, it's insane. Like today we're told Nigel Lonvike's going to be out, Josh Karoma's going to be out for 6 weeks, Nigel Lonvike's out. So it's just like it just never ends. And we've got no fit centre backs for Bristol Rovers on Saturday. It's just we can say the squad's imbalanced, and it is. It's halfway through a makeup, but it's never been able to be put out on the field and tested properly either. So it's very difficult to sit here and kind of say how things are. And a lot of players have come back too early as well. Lars Sorensen came back too early from a hamstring issue, did his hamstring again, and he's had some scar tissue issues, so he's not really hit the straps, if you like. David Kasumu is so important to us. He's such a good midfield destroyer. He did his hamstring, came back too early, did the other hamstring. So it's that kind of season at the minute. Where we just all we can talk about is just how injured our team is, and it's not fun at all. It's really not fun.
I mean, I think first thing to say would be injuries seem to be quite a common thing in football generally at the moment. For whatever reason, we could set up a whole podcast about that. But I'm wondering, is there, when you look at this volume of injuries that you've talked about, Matt, is there something in the sports science department at Huddersfield Town that you would maybe question a little bit, or do you think they've mainly been impact injuries?
There's been bits of both. There's been bits of bad luck. For example, Mikael Miller was really important to us at the earlier stage of the season, and we went away to Leyton Orient, and I can't remember the striker's name, big lad who plays up front for them, just fell on him accidentally and put him out for 4 months. And the same happened to Ruben Roskin, who was his replacement in January. Someone fell on him and he got injured. But there's a lot of soft tissue injuries, a lot of hamstring injuries, which I'm not by any stretch a sports scientist. I didn't even do GCSE PE, by the way. So I can't sit here and say that the sports scientist, that they're all doing something wrong. But the head of performance has been unfortunately lost his role at Huddersfield, and I don't like talking about people losing their jobs because it's people's livelihoods. It's not great. But he's been moved on. I think there are other people behind the scenes have been moved on. So they're obviously moving. I suppose you could say it's moving the deck chairs on the Titanic a little bit because the injuries are still sort of happening. But people are unfortunately losing their jobs, and like I say, a lot of it is bad luck. And you know what football's like. As soon as you hit that adversity, people look for scapegoats and reasons why it happens. And unfortunately, people behind the scenes have lost their jobs. But I mean, it's still quite a new set up at Huddersfield. The owner's relatively new in ownership terms. He's been there, I think, it'll be 2 years in May. But the first year he was hamstrung by a lot of financial issues from the Football League, etc. So they're still kind of finding their way in terms of what they want behind the scenes and on the field. And it takes time to kind of get things right if you don't come in with a solid plan and knowing who and what you want. And I think Kevin Nagel bought the club quite quickly. I'm not saying it's on a whim or anything, but he bought it quite quickly. And I don't think he ever came in with any kind of solid plan. Like Birmingham City, they came in and said, right, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to build a 150,000-seater stadium, etc. And all that kind of stuff that they went off on. There was none of that really with Huddersfield. It was kind of like buy a club, and it's like, right, now what do we do kind of thing. And I think they're still kind of feeling their way in, and they're doing quite well. Off the field, things are quite good. On the field, it's been a bit of a struggle. But I think they're kind of muddling to a better place at the minute. It's just taking a little more time to get to where they want to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Ed, the way Matt's talking about Huddersfield at the moment, are you a little bit worried about them given, firstly, Bolton's form under Schumacher and also Charlton's form over the last few months?
Yeah, it has to be. The injury list is... I hadn't properly registered how bad it is, actually. I mean, I feel like Lasse Sørensen maybe is the best summary of it. It feels like coming back, having a little spell in, and suddenly they're coming back out again, and that's a shame because I think he's a really terrific wing back to have in there. Matt, I wanted to ask about Dion Charles, if I can, because it was the standout. One of the standout things I think for me with Huddersfield over January was this realization that we're going to look at the front line of Dion Charles and Joe Taylor, and the thought of what that could potentially do to League One, having seen them previously. Joe Taylor, of course, we know has been impacted by injuries. That happens, so be it the case. But I'm curious why, I don't know if there is a fitness-related thing that's keeping Dion Charles out of the 11 more than I expected, because I kind of thought he was going to be the main source of goals, or the ideal main source of goals in this team going forwards.
I think he's been out of form for a little while at Bolton as Dion Charles, so I don't think he's quite been 100% at it. And he's struggled. He's really struggled as Dion Charles. I think part of the problem is when we signed him, I didn't really understand the theory behind signing Taylor and Charles. Usually you need kind of a pivot up there. If you're going to play two up front, you need someone who can play with the back to goal and maybe bring the others in, or even a number 10 like Dykes does at Birmingham, who can sort of be that man that everybody runs around, if you like.
Just to back
we
up
don't
that
have one.
point, Matt, when Joe Taylor scored all his goals for Lincoln City, he was playing alongside another striker called Ben House. He does exactly what you described. So just to back up your point there.
Exactly, yeah, and I didn't quite get the Dion Charles signing from that point of view, and then unless you're playing with a number 10 who can do that role, for example. So Dion Charles hasn't really worked for us because he's making a lot of runs, but we're finding that we're knocking the ball long to him. And I looked at a lot of Dion Charles' stats, and I think last season at Bolton, his aerial duel win rate was something like 7%. So he's literally the last person you want to knock the ball long to, in League One. It's not going to work, and that's what we're trying to do. And now we've decided we're going to knock it long to Callum Marshall instead of 19-year-old kid on loan from West Ham. We basically, I think the players we've got are good, but the joined up thinking's not quite there yet for me. I mean, if you sign Joe Taylor, the first thing you need to go is how do we get the best out of this goal scorer we've got? I don't think throwing another goal scorer alongside him who's going to make the same runs is necessarily the way that you would go. You want like you say, Gab, like Ben House or somebody like that. I'm not telling Lincoln we're going to come after another one of their players. They're probably sick of us by now after Toffolo, Sorensen, and all that. But you do need someone who can do the hard yards for him up there, who can hold the ball, who can bring others in, because we're quite good up until the final third, and then when we get in the final third, things fall down a little bit. We haven't scored. I mean, a Huddersfield player hasn't scored in Huddersfield at our ground since the 14th of December. That's one of the problems that we've got at the minute. It's insane, honestly. I've cheated slightly there because there was an own goal in there and a player that we've sold, but.
Oh, Michael
he does,
Hellick's
but we don't
there,
own him anymore, so that's my
it's not
technicality.
there,
That's my
okay,
technicality.
I see your point now. Okay.
Yeah. So there's not a current Huddersfield player who's scored at home since then, and it's part of it's because everything's muddled. There's no sort of, like I say, there's no joined up thinking in terms of what we've done, unfortunately.
I mean, when there is joined up thinking and when there is a bit more of a strategy and when you do find the answer to some of these injury problems and get maybe a bit more luck, and when you do start to recruit better to make a more balanced squad, I'm very confident still that Michael Duff is going to find the answers. However, I don't know that if that's going to be as obvious to Terriers fans who maybe haven't seen the work that maybe for me as a neutral I've seen of him at Cheltenham and at Barnsley, for me to be able to have that kind of confidence. And I'm sort of wondering, has he got a bit of a political battle on his hands to kind of keep people on side, or are fans pretty patient?
Do you think maybe, Matt, there was a little bit, people looked at how instant impact was at Duff at Barnsley and thought, come on then, it's a similar kind of boat and that we're coming back down, everything's in a large shape, it needs to be rescued again. Was there maybe a bit of hope within the fan base that he could kind of just repeat the Barnsley stuff again?
I think there's a lot more pressure at Huddersfield than there is at Barnsley, because the owner came out and said, we want to finish in the top two. He set the standard, he set the bar as top two this season, and he kind of altered that a little and sort of said, if we finish in the playoffs, we need to go through them. So if we don't finish in the playoffs, I think Michael Duff's got a real battle on to keep his job for next season, whether Gab think he's the right man or not. If we don't finish in the playoffs, it will be seen as a major failure, despite the injury, the horrific injury problems he's had. So that will be the problem. If we pick up from now to the end of the season, and if we go out in a blaze of glory or something like that, then maybe, or if we get promoted, then he keeps his job. But the problem he's got at the minute is that this Bolton are hot on our heels, game in hand, etc. Leighton Orient have kind of tapered off slightly the last couple of games, but they're still decent. If we don't finish in that top six, I don't think Michael Duff will be here next year, regardless whether we think he's the right man or not. It's just the owner's I don't think the owner's scared of pulling the trigger. Basically, I think we had 3 managers last season, so I don't think he's bothered about that, which will be a shame, because I don't think Michael Duff's had a fair run because of the injury situation, and I'd like to see
was it 13 the number you said, Matt, of injuries that you've got?
We've had 30 over the course of the season, so 30 players have been injured, and I think we've got around 30. That, like I say, that's more than half of the English teams in the English pyramid have used.
Yeah. Well, so
that's the thing. Like it's not been great, but
No, sorry. I think there might be a bit of a delay there on the line, but I think when Duff was at Barnsley, he had a very consistent 11, and maybe got a bit fortunate in terms of not having quite so many injuries. I'm very confident for me that once he can get a consistent 11 together that feels a bit more balanced, he'll definitely deliver results and get you right at competing for the top two. But at the moment, I hope that the club sticks with him regardless, because I think he's the right person to take you forward. But it's obviously a difficult time at the moment. Can you give me a number between 1 and 10 for your level of confidence that you'll finish in the top 6?
I mean, the Wrexham game was a last chance saloon for top 2, and unfortunately, we didn't get 3 points, but we got an apology from PGMOL, which obviously makes up for it. But we are struggling at the minute. It depends on the injuries, Gab. It really does. If we can get David Kasimu, Balker, and Nigel Lonvike back relatively quickly, I think there's a good chance. If we don't, then there's no chance. So I'm 50-50 at the minute. I'm 50-50. It all depends on how many we can get back and as quickly as possible. And if Joe Taylor can find some form as well, because we're not scoring goals at home, and he looks like he's going to be hopefully the key to that. So 50-50. But again, it just depends if we can, if we needed to get a physio in the January window, never mind, a striker. So hopefully we can. Hopefully, maybe we can get Eileen, maybe one for the older listeners, but maybe Eileen Drury can come in, the old faith healer from Glenn Hoddle's time, and we can have, maybe she can work her wonders or something, if she's still alive.
Absolutely.
50-50.
50-50. Okay. Well, that's helpful. Matt, thanks so much for joining us, and keep up the great work on the Annie Takes That Chance podcast.
No problem, mate. Thank you.
So, Ed, I mean, I think we sort of. Do you think we've sort of settled on the idea that Charlton are going to stay into the playoffs and Bolton are going to come into it?
Yeah, I think we might be being a little reactive there because, as we know, still a quarter of the season to go. It's quite a long way back, but I think it's a sensible thing to think at the moment. Just with the way these teams look, I feel like Barnsley don't have that consistency we're looking for, as we touched on there. It feels like Huddersfield's injuries are going to hold them back, and I hate the idea of leaving in the summer. I do really dislike the idea of that. So I kind of like that doesn't happen for his sake, but it's very easy to look at them in the middle and say those two, but I think it's probably justified at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is that Huddersfield, fixture-wise, they've got on paper a reasonably favourable run of fixtures. They've got Bristol Rovers away. Crawley at home, I think, is the easiest fixture in the league. Bristol Rovers are a little bit out of form at the moment, so those two first. Then Charlton away, which is obviously going to be a tough game. But then they've got Lincoln away, who could be a bit beachy by April, and then Mansfield at home, which is the same before they play Wickham. So 4 of their next 5 games you would class as a favourable fixtures. So if they could take, say, 12 points from the next 5, they'd be on 70 points going into with 6 games to play, which would arguably put them in quite a favourable position. So there's room for things to change.
Yeah, definitely. Just taking the thoughts on that, really. Not much. Okay. I feel like I've been repeating myself 3 times already this show.
Okay, sorry, I don't want to make you.
As we've said, I echo your thoughts. I think we're looking at maybe Thornton up kind of settled in. I noticed it still seems to be a little bit of an anti-Wickham stance. I know we're not talking playoffs. This is more promotion talk than playoffs.
Right,
talk, but I still feel like there's maybe a couple who don't really probably get what Wickham is about. And I going there on Tuesday, I kind of got more of a sense that I think they can keep themselves in the hunt. And obviously Rex will be the one giving them the closest test as this season concludes.
Yeah, possibly. I think the question mark for Wickham is just kind of how good is Mike Dodds as a number 1 manager, and can he get a team over the line? It's not something we've seen.
What I would say, Gab, is the individual players are still there. It's the thing for me. You still got Kone. I was a bit worried when Kenneth Taylor got recalled that'd be it, but he's obviously come back. So you got him and Joe Lowe, who I just love as a centre back pairing. Yeah. I realised on Tuesday night again how good Josh Scowen is, how valuable he is to just sweeping things up and keeping things.
You take him for granted, don't you, Ed? Sometimes.
Yeah, and I also say that their structure in terms of the work rate done by their outside forwards, Bez Labala, Daniel Ludo, and Fred Onyedinma really needs appreciating as well.
But
it works nicely.
Kone is coming back. That's going to be huge.
He's something else. Him. He
Yeah.
really is. I cannot believe that guy was in non-league. He must have been an absolute joke.
Yeah,
Must have been an absolute joke
extraordinary.
at that level.
Yeah, I think Kono returning is the thing that maybe edges it for me. I'm not quite sure about Wrexham still, although it was a huge win for them in midweek. So yeah, I would probably right now lean towards Wickham for the top two. All right, Ed. Well, listen, thanks so much for joining us this evening at late notice. So really appreciate you co-hosting. Thanks to all our guests. Thanks to you for watching at home. You could do us a massive favour if you've enjoyed this Playoff Scramble podcast by getting subscribed to EFL Debate on YouTube and on Spotify. We'd be very grateful for that. And we'll see you again for another League One podcast next week.